In 2024, the average Social Security check ran $1,975 a month, and for Mexican-American seniors in East LA, the Valley, and Tucson, that money has to cover rent and still land supper on the table. Our pension generation knew how to make a pot of frijoles last 4 nights. The supper that fed 12 mouths in 1965 is the same one that feeds one widow in 2026. The recipe never changed. The kitchen did. Hit subscribe and let's roll the tape, because we're walking back to the comal. Number 16 on this list is the caldo yortilla simmered on Fridays. Number 12 stretched a single bone into Sunday. And number 5 on this list is the picadillo that fed a table for under $1. Here are 30 forgotten Mexican suppers for seniors on a tight pension. Number 30, sopa de fideo aguado. The brothy version, not the dry one, the one our abuelas reached for when the pantry was nearly bare. A bag of dry fideo noodles ran maybe 30 cents at the Fiesta on Bandera in San Antonio back in 1988, and a single can of tomato sauce stretched it into supper for 4. You toasted the little angel hair coils in a spoon of oil until they turned the color of a paper bag, then poured in tomato, garlic, a sprig of cilantro, and water from the kettle. That was it. No meat, no fancy stock. On a tight pension, this is the supper that buys you Thursday and Friday both, because half the pot reheats better than fresh. Younger folks have forgotten how loud a comal sounds when fideo hits hot oil. A small bowl, a warm tortilla, a slice of lime. Cheap, fast, and full of the smell of our childhood. Number 29, bistec a la mexicana. 3 colors, 1 pan, supper in 15 minutes. Carnicherias in East LA used to sell the thin-cut bistec, the one labeled Milanesa or Palomilla, for $2 a pound well into the early 90s, and 1 pound fed a couple of seniors for 2 nights. You cube the thin steak, throw it into a hot skillet with diced tomato, white onion, and serrano, and let the juice come up on its own. No sauce to make, no broth to skim. The red, white, and green right there in the pan, which is where the name comes from. For a senior cooking alone, this is the supper that respects your knees, because you stand at the stove for maybe 10 minutes. Serve with refried beans and 1 warm tortilla, and you have a plate that costs under $3. Our generation grew up on this. Quick, honest, and easier on the budget than any drive-thru. Number 28, frijoles charros. Cowboy beans, the soup that came in from the ranches of Nuevo Leon and never left. Working families in the Rio Grande Valley simmered a pot of pintos with a knot of bacon, a quarter onion, and whatever cured meat was hanging in the kitchen, usually a piece of tocino or 2 slices of chorizo. The trick was the broth. You did not drain the beans. You ladled them into a bowl with their cooking liquid, threw in chopped tomato and cilantro at the end, and called it supper. On a fixed income, this is the dish that earns its keep all week, because day 2 charros taste better than day 1. Cooking alone, you can make a quart on Sunday and eat all the way to Wednesday. Smoky, soupy, satisfying. Number 27, calabacitas con queso. Summer squash, sweet corn, a handful of melting cheese, and the smell of our childhood. Mexican zucchini, the round pale kind sold at the Pulga in Houston, was practically free in August and September because every backyard in Texas grew the stuff. You sweat half an onion in a little oil, add diced calabacita, a fresh tomato, the kernels off 1 ear of corn, and a pinch of salt. At the end, you crumble in queso fresco or a slice of asadero and let it melt. That is the whole supper. For a senior who needs something light at night, this sits easy on the stomach and reheats well. A bowl, a tortilla, no heavy meat. Our pension generation calls this a Tuesday plate. Nourishing, gentle, almost forgotten. Number 26, tinga de pollo, from Puebla, by way of every abuela who ever shredded leftover chicken with 2 forks at the kitchen table. The first known printed recipe for tinga showed up in a Pueblan cookbook in 1881, and the dish has been stretching 1 bird across 3 suppers ever since. You boil a single thigh and a single leg, save the broth for soup, then shred the meat and simmer it in a sauce of roasted tomato, sliced onion, and a couple of chipotles in adobo. The word tinga itself means a mess in Old Mexican Spanish, and that is exactly what the pan looks like. For seniors on a tight pension, one $10 package of leg quarters becomes 3 days of supper this way. Pile it on a tostada or roll it in a tortilla, smoky, tangy, and gentle on the dentures. Number 25, lentejas. Lentil soup, the Mexican way, with plantain or pineapple thrown in for sweetness. Our grandmothers in Tucson called it the meatless supper for the days between paychecks. A pound of brown lentils ran under $1 at the Food City on South 6th, and that pound fed a whole family for 2 nights. You simmer the lentils with garlic, onion, tomato, and a few cubes of plantain or a slice of fresh pineapple at the end. The fruit melts into the broth and turns the whole pot sweet and savory at once. Almost no fat, almost no money, plenty of protein. A perfect supper when the gas bill is due. Number 24, huevos a la mexicana. The supper version, scrambled deep at night with the radio on low. Eggs were 38 cents a dozen at Lucky in El Sereno in 1985, and 3 of them with a chopped tomato, a slice of onion, and half a serrano made a plate that any abuelo could put together with his eyes closed. You sweat the onion in a teaspoon of oil, add the tomato and chile, let it cook down for 2 minutes, then pour in the beaten eggs and stir slow. Soft curds, red and green folded through. Salt at the end, never the beginning. For seniors cooking alone, this is the supper that takes 7 minutes from cold stove to warm plate. Roll it into a tortilla, slide a few beans on the side, and the budget stretches one more day. Simple, complete, the smell of our childhood. Number 23, mole de olla. Mole from the pot, the one-vessel supper the soldaderas cooked during the Revolution of 1910 because there was no time and no second pan. A piece of cheap beef shank, a guajillo, a pasilla, a chayote, an ear of corn cut into rounds, a zucchini, a few green beans, and a sprig of epazote. Everything goes into one big olla and simmers for 2 hours while you sit on the porch. The broth turns the color of brick. Working families in San Antonio kept this going on the back burner all afternoon, ladling out bowls as people came in from work. For a senior on a tight pension, a $3 piece of shank turns into 4 supper bowls this way. The marrow gives the broth its body, the zoconosal gives it the tang, one pot, one knife, one supper that tastes like Mexico itself. What most people miss about mole de olla is that the broth, not the meat, is the meal. Number 22, enchiladas verdes, the pension version. No baked casserole, no cup of cream, no 2 pounds of cheese on top. Our abuelas in the Mission District of San Francisco made enchiladas the cheap way, which is the right way. You toast a handful of tomatillos and a serrano on the comal, blend them with garlic and cilantro, and warm the sauce in a low pan. Tortillas get dipped, not fried, just dipped in the warm salsa verde until they soften. Fill each one with a tablespoon of shredded chicken from yesterday's caldo, roll, and pile on a plate. Crumble a little queso fresco over the top. The whole supper costs about $1.50 per person. 6 rolled tortillas, a spoonful of crema if you have it, and you are done. Soft, tangy, easy on older teeth. Younger cooks turn this into a heavy casserole. Our grandmothers knew better. Number 21, pollo deshebrado en caldillo. Shredded chicken in a thin tomato broth, the supper that uses the bird from the Sunday caldo for Monday and Tuesday. You take the meat off the bones, shred it with 2 forks, and simmer it in a quick sauce of tomato, onion, garlic, and a single bay leaf. Salt at the end. The caldillo stays loose, not thick. Spoon it onto a warm tortilla. Fold it like a soft taco. Eat standing if you must. For a senior cooking alone, this turns one boiled chicken into 4 small suppers. Soft, warm, gentle. Cheap by design. Number 20. Nopalitos con huevo. Your tia probably kept a jar of cleaned cactus paddles in the icebox the whole month. Nopalitos cost almost nothing if you cut your own from the alley fence, which plenty of families in East LA and Phoenix did right through the 80s. You dice the paddles, boil them 10 minutes with a sliver of onion to take the slime off, drain, and scramble them into a pan of eggs with a spoon of salsa. That is the whole supper. Mild, slightly tart, full of fiber, friendly to senior digestion. A plate costs about 60 cents. Our pension generation grew up on this on Wednesday nights, forgotten now by anyone who never met an abuela. Number 19, tlacoyos. The oval masa pillows that fed the Aztecs and still feed us, stuffed with mashed beans or fava or requesón. Spanish chroniclers in the early 1500s wrote down recipes for these little blue corn cakes because the markets of Tenochtitlan were full of them. The name comes from the Nahuatl tlatlauyo, made from ground maize. You shape a thick oval of masa, press a spoon of bean paste into the middle, fold the masa over, and grill it on a dry comal for 4 minutes aside. No oil. Toppings come after. Cactus, salsa verde, a crumble of queso. For seniors on a fixed income, a kilo of masa makes 10 tlacoyos for under $3. Crispy outside, soft inside, almost extinct outside Mexico City. Number 18, sopa de tortilla. The supper that turns yesterday's stale tortillas into tonight's bowl. Our grandmothers in San Antonio never threw a tortilla away. They dried them on the counter, cut them into strips, and fried the strips in a little oil while a pot of tomato broth simmered with garlic, onion, and a pasilla chile. The dried tortilla strips went into the bowl, the hot broth went over, and a sliver of avocado floated on top. Senior-friendly because you do not need to chew much, gentle on the stomach, warm all the way down. A whole pot costs maybe $2 if you already have the tortillas. Cooking alone, you can portion it into 4 containers and eat through the week. Smoky, comforting, and impossible to ruin. Number 17, champurrado. The supper drink, the corn and chocolate one our grandmothers thickened with masa on cold nights. Atole drinks trace back to pre-Columbian Mexico, the Mayans and Aztecs mixing cacao with corn and water as both ceremony and supper. Champurrado is just atole with chocolate folded in. The Spanish word champorrar meaning to mix. You whisk a 1/4 cup of fresh masa or masa harina into water with a stick of cinnamon, drop in a tablet of Mexican chocolate, and stir constantly until it turns thick enough to coat a wooden spoon. For a senior alone in December, a hot mug of champurrado with a single concha pan dulce is a complete supper. $2, 10 minutes, the whole kitchen warming up. Our pension generation called this a tamale night drink. Comforting, ancient, almost gone. Number 16, caldo de pollo. The Friday caldo, your tia simmered with the bones from Tuesday and a bag of vegetables from the bottom of the icebox. Mexican Catholic families across Texas and the Southwest kept a quiet rhythm of caldo on Fridays right through the 80s, sometimes for fast, sometimes just because it was the cheapest night to feed everyone. A whole bone-in leg quarter ran $1 at the Bolners in San Antonio in 1989, and that 1/4, plus a carrot, a potato, a chayote, and an ear of corn cut in thirds, fed 3 for 2 nights. You drop the chicken in cold water, bring it slow to a simmer, skim the foam, and let it go for an hour. Senior-friendly broth, warm tortilla, a wedge of lime, the supper that runs on patience. Number 15, sopa de albondigas. Little meatballs floating in a clear tomato broth, the supper our abuelas made when a 1/2 pound of ground meat had to feed 5 people. The trick was the rice, raw rice mixed straight into the meat so the grains swelled inside each albondiga as it cooked. 1/2 pound of ground beef ran $1.20 at the Pueblo on Magnolia in El Paso in 1986, and that 1/2 pound rolled out 20 small meatballs. You drop them gently into a simmering broth of tomato, onion, garlic, carrot, zucchini, and a sprig of mint and let them cook 15 minutes. The mint is the part younger cooks always skip and our grandmothers never did. For a senior cooking alone, you eat 6 on the first night and freeze the rest in a quart jar for next week. Warm, soft, almost like soup and meatloaf in one bowl. Pension-friendly to its bones. Number 14, quesadillas de queso y epazote. The fresh comal kind, not the flour tortilla kind from the freezer aisle. Our grandmothers in Mexico City and later in the colonias of San Antonio kept a pot of epazote growing on the back step year-round because the herb cost nothing and went into half the suppers in the kitchen. You warm a corn tortilla on the comal. Lay down a thin slice of Oaxaca cheese or asadero. Drop in 2 leaves of fresh epazote, fold the tortilla in half, and press it flat for a minute on each side. The epazote does what no other herb does, sharp and a little anise, cutting through the melted cheese. 3 quesadillas for under $1.50. A senior alone can make this in 8 minutes with 1 good knee. Crispy, melted, herby. The supper our pension generation calls a Tuesday plate when the icebox is bare. Number 13, arroz con leche. The sweet supper our abuelas made on cold nights when the body wanted something soft and gentle going down. A cup of rice, 4 cups of milk, a stick of canela, a strip of lime peel, and sugar to taste. That was the whole grocery list, and it still runs about $1.50 at any tiendita on the east side of LA. You simmer the rice with the cinnamon stick first, then pour in the milk and stir slow for 30 minutes until the grains swell and the milk thickens into a porridge that coats a wooden spoon. A senior alone makes a single quart and eats it warm Monday night, cold Tuesday morning, and warm again Wednesday. 3 suppers from 1 pot, and here is what most people miss. Arroz con leche is not a dessert in our tradition. It is a supper, full stop, the kind a widow with arthritis can stir with 1 hand. The numbers tell you why this matters. 44% of Hispanic Americans over 65 live below twice the federal poverty line, and food insecurity among Mexican American seniors runs more than double the rate of white seniors. Roughly half of older adults who qualify for SNAP never sign up, often because they grew up believing food assistance was for somebody worse off than they were. So our pension generation cooks the way our grandmothers cooked, on dignity and ingenuity and a stick of cinnamon. Arroz con leche is what that dignity tastes like at 8 o'clock at night when the apartment is quiet, the heat is set low to save the bill, and the spoon goes round and round in the pot. Moorish in origin, brought to Mexico by the Spanish, made Mexican by the canela, and made American by the abuelas, who carried the recipe to the Valley, the Mission, and Tucson. It is the cheapest complete supper on this list, and it might be the most beloved. Number 12, caldo de res. The Sunday supper our tias built around a single beef shank, the one that stretched 1 bone into a meal for the whole household. A 1.5-pound bone-in shank cost about $2 at the Fiesta on Bandera in 1989, and that 1 piece fed 4 adults with bowls left over. You drop the shank into cold water with half an onion and a head of garlic, bring it slow to a simmer, skim the gray foam, and let it go an hour. Then in go the rounds of corn, the wedges of cabbage, the chayote, the carrots, the zucchini, and a sprig of cilantro at the end. The marrow slips out of the bone and gives the broth its body. For a senior alone, the shank is Sunday supper, the broth is Monday, and the vegetables fold into a soft taco on Tuesday. 1 bone, 3 meals, the smell of our grandmother's kitchens on a Sunday afternoon when the windows fogged up. Patient and restorative. Number 11, sopa de papa, Mexican potato soup, the thin broth kind with chunks of soft potato and a green chile floating on top. Working families in Guanajuato and later in the small Mexican neighborhoods of Chicago in the 70s kept a pot of this on the stove during the cold months, the cheapest hot supper in the kitchen. You sweat half an onion, add 3 potatoes cut into cubes, pour in 4 cups of water with a bouillon cube, and let it go 20 minutes. At the end, you slide in a roasted poblano, cut into strips, and a splash of milk to soften the broth. Almost no fat, almost no money. A bowl that runs you maybe 60 cents. For a senior on a fixed income, a single pot reheats 4 nights without losing its character. Mild, warming, gentle on the stomach. Number 10, croquetas de papa. Mashed potato cakes the size of a tortilla, pan-fried golden, and eaten with a spoon of warm salsa on top. Our grandmothers made these the night after they boiled too many potatoes for caldo, refusing on principle to waste a single starch. You mash the cold potato with an egg, a handful of grated cheese, a little salt, shape a flat patty, and fry it in a film of oil for 2 minutes aside. 3 croquetas, a spoon of beans, and supper is on the plate for under $1. A senior alone can make 4 at a time and keep them in the icebox for a quick reheat. Crispy outside, soft inside. The leftover supper our pension generation grew up calling a treat. Number 9. Mole verde. The green mole, the simpler cousin of mole poblano, built on tomatillos, pumpkin seed, and a handful of fresh herbs instead of 20 dried ingredients. Our abuelas in Puebla taught the recipe to the daughters who carried it north to the colonias of Houston and the small kitchens of South Central LA. You toast a half cup of pepitas on the comal until they pop, blend them with boiled tomatillos, a serrano, a clove of garlic, and a handful of cilantro and parsley. Then warm the sauce in a little oil and simmer a couple of chicken thighs in it for 20 minutes. The whole supper runs about $4 and feeds 3. For a senior cooking alone, one batch of the verde sauce keeps a week in the icebox and turns 3 different proteins into 3 different suppers. Bright, tangy, the smell of our childhood when the molcajete came out on the counter. Number 8. Sopa de habas. Dried fava bean soup, the Lenten supper our grandmothers made on Fridays during Quaresma when meat was off the table. A pound of dried habas ran under $1 at the Mercado on Olvera Street in 1988, and that pound made a pot that fed 6. You soak the favas overnight, drain and simmer them with garlic, onion, tomato, and a sprig of epazote for 2 hours until they collapse into a thick green-brown porridge. Some grandmothers tossed in a few cubes of nopal. Others floated a roasted pasilla chile on top. A bowl with a warm tortilla is the complete supper. For a senior on a tight pension, this is one of the cheapest plant protein meals in the Mexican kitchen, easy on the budget and easy on the teeth. Earthy, ancient, almost extinct outside Abuela's house. Number 7. Garbanzos guisados. Stewed chickpeas with chorizo or with nothing at all. The cheap protein supper that crossed from Spain into Mexico and never left. A can of garbanzos at the Food City on South 6th in Tucson cost about 70 cents in 1987, and you could stretch one can into supper for 2 with a bit of chorizo, a chopped tomato, and a clove of garlic. You crumble the chorizo into a hot skillet, render the fat, add the tomato and the drained garbanzos, and simmer 10 minutes. A warm tortilla on the side. For a senior cooking alone, this is the supper that respects the wallet and the clock. 12 minutes, $2, a plate full of protein. Smoky, soft, the kind of supper our pension generation calls Wednesday food. Number 6. Atole de avena. Oatmeal atole, the warming evening drink our grandmothers in the Sierra made on cold nights when there was nothing else for supper. A bag of rolled oats and a piloncillo cone, that was the entire recipe. You toast a half cup of oats in a dry pan, blend them with 3 cups of water until smooth, pour the mixture into a saucepan with a stick of canela and a chunk of brown sugar, and stir slow over low heat for 10 minutes until it thickens into a soft, drinkable porridge. A mug of atole de avena, a pan dolce on the side, and supper is done. For a senior on a fixed income with the gas bill due, this whole supper runs you about 40 cents and warms the kitchen up while it cooks. Soft, comforting, gentle. The supper our pension generation calls a December plate even when it is May. Number 5. Picadillo de res. The picadillo that fed a table for under $1, the supper our grandmothers in San Antonio built on 1 pound of ground beef and whatever was in the vegetable drawer. In 1985, a pound of carne molida ran 98 cents at the H-E-B on Nogalitos. A russet potato was a nickel, half an onion was a penny, and a tomato off the windowsill cost nothing. Total supper for 4 came in around $1.25, tortillas included. You brown the beef, drain the fat, add the diced potato, onion, tomato, garlic, a handful of raisins for the Spanish touch, and a pinch of cumin and oregano. 20 minutes on a low flame and the kitchen smells like every abuela's kitchen on a Wednesday night. Roll it into a warm tortilla or spoon it over white rice. 1 pound of meat becomes 4 suppers. Proof that the most beloved supper in our tradition was born of making $1 do the work of 5. Number 4. Chiles rellenos, the pension version. not the deep-fried banquet kind. Our grandmothers in the Bajío cooked these on the comal with no egg batter and almost no oil. The slim supper for evenings when the body wanted something light. You char 2 poblanos on the burner, peel the skins under cold water, slit the side and pull out the seeds, stuff each one with a slice of asadero and a spoon of shredded chicken from yesterday's caldo, and warm them flat on a hot comal until the cheese melts. No batter, no frying, no mess. 2 chiles, a spoon of refried beans, a warm tortilla. The whole supper runs about $2.20. The chile relleno that does not leave your kitchen smelling like an oil fire for 3 days. Soft, smoky, gentle. Number 3. Quesadillas de flor de calabaza. Squash blossom quesadillas. The soft, golden supper our great-grandmothers in Xochimilco, filled with the flowers that bloomed in the back garden every summer morning. The Aztecs ate squash blossoms long before the Spanish arrived, and the recipe has survived almost unchanged through 500 years of kitchens. You strip the green sepals off a dozen fresh blossoms, sweat them for 2 minutes with a sliver of onion and a leaf of epazote, lay the wilted flowers on a warm corn tortilla with a thin slice of Oaxaca cheese, fold and press on the comal until the cheese melts. For a senior alone, a small bunch of blossoms from the Mexican grocer runs about $3 and fills 6 quesadillas. Delicate, slightly sweet, vegetal, the supper that tastes like a garden in August. Our pension generation remembers when the blossoms grew wild on the squash vines in every backyard from Albuquerque to East LA, almost extinct on American tables now, and one of the great quiet flavors of the Mexican kitchen. Number 2. Soaps. Thick masa cakes the size of your palm, pinched up at the edges to hold a spoonful of beans, a sprinkle of cheese, and a smear of salsa. Our grandmothers in Mexico City and Guadalajara taught the recipe to the daughters who carried it north to East LA in the 50s, and the dish has been a Friday night supper in Mexican-American households ever since. A kilo of fresh masa runs about $4 and yields 15 soaps, enough for 3 suppers for a senior cooking alone. You shape a thick disc on the comal, cook it 2 minutes aside, then pinch the warm edges up with your fingertips to make a little rim. Top with refried beans, a crumble of queso fresco, a drizzle of crema, and a spoon of salsa verde. Eat with the hands, 3 at a sitting, supper done. Crispy below, soft inside. The small supper our pension generation never stopped making. Number 1. Frijoles de la olla. The bedrock supper, the pot of beans simmered slow with onion and garlic, eaten with a torn tortilla and a spoon. There is no Mexican kitchen in Oaxaca or East LA or the Rio Grande Valley where this pot has not lived on the back burner for 1,000 Sundays. A pound of pinto beans ran about $1 at the Vallarta on Cesar Chavez in 1992, and that pound fed a family of 4 for 3 nights. Drop them into cold water with half an onion and a head of garlic, and let them go 3 hours on a low flame. Salt at the end, never the beginning. The cooking liquid is half the meal, dark and savory. For a senior on a tight pension, a pot of frijoles is supper guaranteed and dignity preserved. Our grandmothers built whole lives on this one pot. Quiet, ancient, the most forgotten luxury in America. Try one of these this week. Just one. Pick the cheapest, the one with the shortest grocery list, the one our grandmothers would have reached for on a Tuesday with the gas bill on the counter. Stir it slow. Eat it warm. Salt it at the end. Our pension generation did not eat poor. We ate patient. We ate with the seasons and with whatever the wallet allowed, and we called the table dignified anyway. As my own abuela used to say, with her hand on the rim of the bean pot, si no se cocina con paciencia, no alimenta. If it is not cooked with patience, it does not feed. That was the whole rule book, and it still is.